Hey everyone, Dan here. Before we get into it, if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps a lot. And also keep in mind that these are my own thoughts, opinions, and ideas. These are not meant to be, nor should you take them as investment or trading advice in any way, shape, or form. Do your own due diligence, put in the work for yourself, and make your decisions based on that. Enjoy. All right, folks, here we are just before market close on Friday, October 22nd. We're going to take a look at Matterport today. So Matterport down quite a bit today, I mean almost 3.5%, but still kind of in this range in this white box, and that's mostly what I want to pay attention to. But let me give you the rundown of the video today. We're going to go through some levels and some charting, and then we're going to take a look at some indicators, and then we'll flip over to the daily and see how you might be able to think about daily action within Matterport if you're looking for an entry, or if you're looking for a swing trade or a day trade or something like that. And then we'll flip over to the data and just take a quick look at where things stand with MTTR. So Matterport is on this sort of longer term uptrend. It's quite far away from this support line. And as we know, the further something is away from its support line, the more risk you're sort of taking by entering a position at that point, because the reward zone is sort of like buying low and selling high, obviously, and that buying low happens at some key critical level. Now, I'm not saying it has to come down to this yellow line in particular. We talk about closer in support levels that it has. It's all going to depend on what the price action does at any given point in time. But just something to always keep in mind regardless is the further that you're buying the price action away from a key zone, the more risk you're taking on. All right, so we have this uptrend support with the yellow line. Now, if we zoom in here to this white box is a range, and what we look for in a range has been in here since the end of September, and it's nearly the end of October now, so it's getting close to a month. They could certainly spend a full month in this range, and it's just sort of using both bounds of this box as support and resistance. It's actually starting to tighten up a little bit at the moment, but we'll see if it expands further around. This purple box I'll talk about in a second. What we look for in something that's sort of range bound like this is, obviously a consolidation zone and then a big move in one direction. Now, oftentimes when we look at a big run up like this and then a pullback and consolidation, we look for a secondary run, right? And oftentimes that secondary run is where the real hit takes place. The real hit in a good way. I guess hit to your wallet is a bad thing, but I mean, that's where the real explosive move comes from. So that's sort of what I would be looking for. MTTR doesn't mean that it can't go the other way. It definitely can. Maybe we have an overall, some macro forces that come in that force it down. Maybe there's some news that comes out. You never know. But just from pure charting perspective, this sort of motion would make a lot of sense. This ran up from about 13, we'll just call it 13 to 27. We'll take the lower end of both of those. So it ran up about $10. So coming down about $5 or about 50% is the max that you want to see it consolidating at. And it's right about in that range at the moment. Much of this is sort of more of an art than a science. We have some sort of like heuristics to try to help us along the way. So that would be the first thing to be looking for, is where does Matterport break out of this range? Is it breaking out of this to the upside, to the downside? And if so, then what is it doing after that point? I would expect if it breaks to the upside that it makes an attempt at this 2241 pretty cleanly. And if it breaks to the downside, I would look for it to potentially bounce at this yellow zone. But even then, if it can hold that is going to be another question, because it'd be breaking downwardly into an upward trend. So it's kind of a challenging position. So that's what I'd be looking for from the range particulars. And then this purple zone, this stretches from like 1921 down to 1889. I guess it's lower than that, 1886. So 1886 to 1918, and this is basically like the key kind of pivot point in here. This is where it's going to sort of like bob and weave up and down. And I don't just say that because it's like toward the middle, but these draw back like right around the $19 mark, draws back here to key pivot zones. So you see right about here, right in the same range, you see this support that turned into this resistance and this resistance. And then it had a big move after that, right? So it had a big move in both directions right around this pivot point. Big move to the up when it flipped this resistance to support. big move up, and then big move down when it flipped that support to resistance. And this is why I say there are some sort of like rules that you can follow with charting to try to give yourself a better than chance opportunity to make moves. But this is kind of a key example. This candle here could have fooled a lot of folks, right? Because this is a very hammerish looking candle, relatively hammerish. I mean, I know there's a little wick at the top, but I just think after this drop from 28 down to at this low, it would have been 1139. So there's a huge percentage drop. And then this formation of a candle, that could have fooled a lot of folks, especially with this movement upward immediately following, right? But then you had a lot more pain to come down to 1045 after that, and just like a long period of time. So several days and just bleeding. So that's why I say that there are some general rules, there are some heuristics, there are things that give a better than chance probability most times. But there's certainly plenty of ways in which that falls apart, and this is an example of one of those, which is the only reason I wanted to point it out. But in any case, so just sort of like continuing to move around that purple box would make a lot of sense to me. And then, like I said, if it is able to break, these are the zones that I'd look for it to test first to the upside, 2241, and then 2453, which I know misses the mark on this one a little bit, but this draws back here and is actually what I think kind of happened, was that it was testing this range, 2453, and it just didn't quite make it on this attempt, right? And then it sold off. So that's what the charting elements are looking like to me. And obviously just the bottom bound of this box at the moment, or the bottom of this box, is the support zone. That's why I don't have additional support zones to the downside, because it's sort of there, and then it's sort of like here around like 1750-ish, and then it's just this yellow line. So that's why I haven't sort of like gone into a bunch of charting to the downside, not because I don't think it can go down. Let's look at some indicators. So we'll pick some standard things to start with. So MACD looks as though the bearish momentum could be dying down, could be looking to flip. You also kind of see that reflected in the volume, overall volume coming down, and overall it's obviously been in a sell volume kind of territory. But it's going to need obviously buy volume to pick up in order to make that happen. But every opportunity, I guess I would say, for a bullish crossover here on the MACD. That said, you look at this time frame here, and there was definitely a head fake there, right? It looks like it was going to cross over, and then it was like, no, I'm going to go down here instead. It is still situated just above the baseline, so it certainly has more room to the downside than to the upside on the MACD. On the RSI, it's coming down to mid-range on the RSI, and these are really critical points. RSI will act, if you want to think of it as sort of like its own form of support and resistance, that flips right around this mid-range, which is 50. So it came down from overbought and has been just kind of consolidating right along the 50, but that sort of more bolsters the idea that I have with it being in this range that's just kind of consolidating, waiting for its next big move. Now, the fact that it hasn't come down and hit the mid-range and fallen pretty significantly, that is an additional factor that leads me to believe that this next move, unless there's some greater market force, at play or something like that, or some really unexpected bad news about the stock itself, I would expect that for charting and trend alone, that the next move is going to come to the upside. On the MAs, you see support on the 180 down here is pretty close to this yellow line, and it's sort of fighting with this 20 MA similarly, as it has been with that upper bound of the range. And then the 50 coming into the box now, which is good because this 50 could help carry it up with some additional support and get itself out of the top end of that box. Lastly, we'll get the Ichimoku cloud. Now it was a sell signal here when this golden conversion line crossed below this yellow baseline, and that happened, and now they're kind of running in parallel with each other. I know they aren't the smoothest lines, and they can be kind of hard to look at, but these buy and sell signals are generally pretty solid in my experience. Now, when there's this sell signal that comes and the price action is over the cloud, that's a weak sell signal. It's a stronger sell signal when the price action is below a cloud and you get that crossover. So what I'd be looking for here is if this can continue to even move sideways, does it go into this cloud? Does it catch some extra support on this cloud and this cloud helps bring it up and out? And if so, do we get a crossover with this conversion line crossing above the baseline, throwing a bullish signal with the price action above the cloud? So that would be a strong buy signal if that comes to fruition. All right, on the daily, I said we were going to do the daily, so let's look at the 1 day. Now with the 1 day, I don't want to get rid of this box, so sorry, I know it's kind of annoying to look at, but I'll try to make it quick and as painless as possible. But these days are just sort of pretty standard, right? Where it starts off and it gets stuck under the VWAP and it tests the VWAP and comes down and tests the VWAP again, and it's able to reclaim it, but then it's just chopping around. And to me, what this looks like is just algos kind of playing whack-a-mole and just taking out a bunch of buy and sell orders right along the VWAP. So not really much of anything to speak of. It's mostly a sideways day that just got weighted overly to the downside because it started off, so with such a sell-off there for the first, say, half of the day or so. Yeah, VWAP definitely proving to be a strong indicator here for intraday. So that'd be my go-to on this intraday. For example, the MAs potentially as well, particularly the red 180. Yeah, even then, even with the flip here, it didn't really do much. It was much more so that neon green VWAP. All right, on the data side of things, we have a little bit of additional return potential per analyst's consensus ratings. To me, that doesn't necessarily mean anything other than retail and or institutions might come in to try to see it through to that return potential. 4 buys with no holds and no sells is certainly a good sort of distribution. What I'd be looking for there in terms of catalysts would be more, because 4 is not many, right? More analysts to come in with buy ratings, with overweight ratings and price targets exceeding this 2150 consensus. That to me could bring a lot of buy pressure in, especially if it's considered like a high value analyst. Price down almost 8.5% for the last month, so quite a drawdown. If you've been holding for the last month, definitely seeing almost 10% of your investment bleed away, kind of annoyingly. Isn't that exciting? So estimates on Ortex today, shorts coming down a little bit, so pretty low. Short interest in this stock, 6.59%. That said, though, the utilization quite high, and the cost to borrow, not the nothing that we see with a lot of stocks, but not anything that's going to put a lot of pressure on these stocks or these shorts to pack up shop and go home from the cost to borrow perspective. But interesting that it's such a small percentage of the free float, but the utilization is so high. So I'm not 100% sure what factors into that. I don't know what the float of Matterport is, but if you have some insight into that, feel free to drop it into the comments below for other folks to see. 21, I don't know, could be something to do with lockups or insider shareholdings. I don't know. I'm not super in-depth familiar with the stock. I know that their product does seem pretty cool, and I could see myself, getting heavy into Matterport, but I'm first waiting to see what it does out of this range. That's mostly what I'm waiting for. All right, folks, so I hope you had a good trading week and that you have a nice weekend ahead, and I appreciate you watching. I will see you in the next video.